The alarm clock cut through the silence of the pre-dawn morning like a dull knife, jerking Michael Cannon out of a dream he couldn't quite remember. 6:30 a.m., just like every weekday morning for the last 20 years. He slapped the clock, silencing it, and froze, staring at the bedroom ceiling. The dim light of the street lamps filtered through the blinds, casting slanting shadows on the walls. Allison slept nearby. Her breathing was even, and her body was a familiar silhouette under the blanket. She didn't move when the alarm rang. She hadn't woken up from him for a long time. Michael swung his legs off the bed, the cold wooden floor burning his bare feet. There was silence in the house, only somewhere in the distance the awakened heating boiler was humming. Their craftsman-style home in Portland's Laurelhurst neighborhood was the embodiment of what he had once dreamed of as an architect. Clean lines, warm wood, a hint of history without being too pompous. But now the house seemed like someone else's drawing. A life built for stability, not passion. In the kitchen, he began the usual ritual. Grind the beans, brew the coffee, pour it into the old cracked ceramic mug he had been using since his university days. The aroma of coffee, sharp and bittersweet, filled the air, but was no longer invigorating as before. Michael stood at the window, watching the first gray rays of light creep over the backyard. The maple tree planted when Aiden was born was turning red, its leaves curling at the edges. Autumn was coming, heavy and inevitable. He took a sip of coffee, the burning taste bringing him back to reality. At 45, Michael was still in shape, broad shoulders, a strong jawline despite his years, but the mirror didn't lie. Gray hair appeared at the temples, thin wrinkles framed the eyes. He looked like a man who had traded big dreams for a steady paycheck. He once drew designs on napkins for buildings that could change the skyline of cities. Now he designed shopping centers and office complexes for a firm that valued efficiency over art. It paid the bills. This allowed children to study in good schools. This kept Allison in the life she was used to. Allison. He looked at his watch, 6:45. Soon she will get up and start her morning marathon. Yoga, smoothies, email. They will exchange a few words, maybe kiss each other on the cheek if they cross paths. Their marriage wasn't destroyed, not completely. It was empty. 20 years had worn away the rough edges of their love, leaving something polished but lifeless. They were partners in logistics, schedules, transportation, bills, but not in dreams or desires. Michael couldn't remember the last time they had laughed together, for real, or stayed up late talking about anything deeper than who would pick Sophia up from soccer practice. He rinsed the mug and put it in the dishwasher, the clink of ceramic against metal sounding louder than it should have in the quiet house. A faint creak of floorboards was heard upstairs. Probably Aiden, reluctantly getting out of bed before school. The guy was 16, lanky, silent, always wearing headphones and carrying a phone. Sophia, 13 years old, was still a spark of light, talkative, curious, her room a chaos of brushes and tattered books. Michael loved them to the point of pain, even if at times he felt like a stranger in their world. By 7:15, he was sitting in his Audi, weaving through morning traffic on I-84. The Portland skyline loomed ahead, a mix of glass skyscrapers and old brick buildings softened by fog from the Willamette River. He turned on the radio, tuned to NPR, but the news, another forest fire, another political scandal, was blurred into white noise. His thoughts wandered to the project waiting on his desk, a shopping complex for a chain of pharmacies. Functional, soulless, work that made him wonder why he studied Frank Lloyd Wright and Zaha Hadid in the first place. The phone in the center console vibrated. Message from Allison. Don't forget about Aiden's parent-teacher conference tomorrow. 16 o'clock. No greeting, no warmth. Just another task. He quickly typed understood and threw the phone back, squeezing the steering wheel tighter. When did they become like this? A couple who communicates like colleagues. In the office, a glass cube in the Pearl District, Michael settled into his cubbyhole. The table is littered with drawings, coffee-stained post-it notes, and a framed photo of the four of them at Cannon Beach 3 summers ago. Aiden was still a child then, smiling with a hole instead of a tooth. Sophia clung to Michael's hand, her hair tangled in the wind. Allison's smile was bright but distant, her eyes already somewhere else. He looked at the photo and something tightened in his chest. When did they stop being that family? Good morning, Mike, Rachel, the junior architect, called 2 cubicles away. Young, ambitious, her sketches were bold and impractical. Michael was jealous of her thirst. Have you seen the letter about the pharmacy project? They want revised plans by Friday. Yeah, he replied, forcing a smile. Another masterpiece for the suburbs. She laughed, but he didn't. He opened his laptop and stared at the CAD program, where the lines and angles seemed to mock him. This was not what he started out for. He wanted to build something meaningful, something that would outlive him. Instead, he drew parking lots. By noon, he was drowning in work, but his thoughts still escaped. To Allison, to the children, to the life he built brick by brick. He thought about the sketches on napkins he carried in his pocket, now stuffed into some drawer. Thought about how Allison had looked at him before, with fire in her eyes, when they were young, in love, drinking cheap wine in their first apartment. Where did it go? The phone vibrated again. New message, this time from an unfamiliar number. Do you know she's lying to you? Michael froze, his finger hovering over the screen. The message was short, without a signature, but the words pierced like a knife. He reread them, feeling his blood run cold. Who is this? And what the hell are they talking about? His first impulse was to delete the message, write it off as spam or someone's cruel joke. But something in him, a shadow of doubt that had long been ripening in the depths, prevented him from pressing the button. He put the phone face down, but the words were already stuck in his head like a thorn. The rest of the day passed in a fog. In a meeting, he barely listened, nodding in the right places, while his colleagues argued about parking spaces and lighting. Returning home, he found the usual scene. Allison on the couch with her laptop, Sophia in her room, Aiden with headphones on at the kitchen table, scrolling something on his phone. Dinner was silent, interrupted only by the clatter of forks and occasional questions from Sophia about a school project. Allison looked as usual, put together, beautiful, her dark hair pulled back into a neat bun. But Michael couldn't look away. Lying. About what? Are you okay? She suddenly asked, looking up from the plate. He blinked, caught off guard. Yes, just tired. Long day. She nodded, returning to her food, and did not ask questions. It was so like them not to dig deeper, not to touch the cracks. But now the cracks seemed wider, deeper, and Michael felt the foundation of their lives beginning to crumble. At night, he lay awake, looking into the darkness. The phone on the nightstand was silent, but the message was still burning in his memory. He turned to Allison. Her back was to him like a wall. He wanted to reach out, touch her, ask what was happening. But instead, he closed his eyes, and a whisper sounded in his head. Do you know she's lying to you? Michael Cannon rarely left the office before 5, but today his head was pounding, as if someone was driving nails into his temples. The migraine came in waves, intensifying from the light of the monitor and the endless hum of voices at the next meeting. He took time off from his boss, citing illness, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he was driving home through the rain-slick streets of Portland. The windshield wipers slid lazily across the windshield, and the radio mumbled something about traffic jams on the Ross Island Bridge. Michael barely listened. His thoughts revolved around yesterday's message. Do you know she's lying to you? He tried to convince himself that this was someone's joke, a mistake, spam. But the words stuck in my head like a rusty hook, clinging to every doubtful moment of the past months. Allison, working late. Allison, who began going to company dinners more often. Allison, who one day came home with the smell of someone else's cologne on her scarf. He then chalked it up to imagination and fatigue. But now he wasn't so sure. As Michael approached the house, he noticed a black SUV in the driveway. A Lexus, shiny, with tinted windows, parked slightly crookedly, as if the driver was in a hurry. The car was unfamiliar. Allison drove a silver Volvo, but their friends and neighbors did not own such cars. Michael frowned, turned off the engine, and sat in silence for a minute, listening to the rain patter on the roof. Maybe it's a client. Allison sometimes hosted colleagues at home to discuss marketing campaigns. But something about that car, its brazen, alien presence, made his stomach churn. He entered the house through the front door, trying to walk quietly. It was unusually quiet inside. No sound from the TV, no footsteps from Sophia, who usually runs around the house after school, no music from Aiden's room. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of droplets on the windows. Michael took off his coat, hung it on a hook, and stood there, listening. Something was wrong. The air seemed heavy, as if saturated with secretion. "Allison," he called, but the voice sounded more muffled than he expected. There was no answer. He walked up the stairs, the steps creaking under his weight. The migraine was still throbbing, but now it was drowned out by the growing noise in his ears, a mixture of adrenaline and foreboding. He stopped on the second floor. Sounds were coming from their bedroom at the end of the corridor. At first, there is a quiet laugh, low, playful, Allison's. Then a man's voice, deep, with a slight hoarseness. Michael froze, his hand frozen on the railing. My heart began to pound, each beat reverberating in my temples. The bedroom door was slightly open, a gap a couple of centimeters wide letting in a strip of light. He took a step forward, then another, moving slowly, as if afraid to frighten away the truth that was waiting behind the door. The sound became clearer, the rustling of sheets, a muffled groan, the rhythmic creaking of the bed. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. He knew what he would see, but he still wasn't ready. Through the gap he saw them. Allison, his wife, lay on their bed, her dark hair spilling over the pillow, her skin glistening with sweat. A man loomed over her, Nathan Collins, her colleague, the same charismatic strategist she had mentioned at corporate events. His shirt was unbuttoned, his trousers were pulled down, his movements were sharp and confident. Allison wrapped her arms around his back, her nails digging into his skin and her lips curling into a smile Michael hadn't seen in years. This was not just betrayal. It was passion, alive, furious, such as their marriage had not known for ages. Michael couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to this scene, to the sound of their bodies, to the smell of her perfume still hanging in the air. He wanted to rush in, scream, break something. His fists were already clenched, his nails dug into his palms. But instead he took out his phone. His fingers trembled, but he opened the camera and took a photo. One. Then the second one. Proof. Not for her, not for Nathan. For myself. So that later, when the pain became unbearable, he could remind himself that it was real. He stepped back, careful not to let the floorboards give him away. Allison's laughter rang again, and each sound cut him like glass. Michael went down, moving on autopilot. He grabbed his coat and keys and walked out into the rain without looking back. The SUV was still parked in the driveway, taunting him. Michael got into his car, started the engine, and drove away, not knowing where he was going, as long as he was away from this house, from this truth. The rain lashed the windshield, the city blurred in a gray haze. Michael stopped in a parking lot near the river, where tourists usually walked, but today, in this weather, there was no one. He turned off the engine and sat looking out over the murky waters of the Willamette. His hands were still shaking, his phone lay face down on the passenger seat. He didn't want to look at the pictures. I didn't want to see her face, her body, her betrayal. But he knew he would do it. Later, when the pain becomes stronger than the rage. Michael tried to remember when everything went wrong. Were there signs he ignored? Allison had always been ambitious, her career in marketing growing rapidly, unlike his own, which was stuck in a rut. She shone at parties, her laughter attracted people, and he, a silent architect, often felt like a shadow next to her. Nathan Collins, with his expensive suits and easy smile, was her world, a world where Michael had long since become superfluous. He slammed his fist onto the steering wheel, the pain in his knuckles briefly distracting him from the pain that was tearing through his chest. 20 years. Children. House. Everything he built, everything he gave up his dreams for, turned out to be a lie. He thought about Aiden and Sophia. How will he tell them? Will he be able to? Or had Allison already planned her way out, leaving him to deal with the wreckage? The phone vibrated. He grabbed it, expecting to see her name, but it was the same unfamiliar number. Now you know. What will you do? Michael stared at the screen. His breathing became heavy. Someone knew. Someone was watching. But instead of fear, he felt a strange relief. He was not alone in this nightmare. Someone else saw the cracks in his life. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the gallery and forced himself to look at the pictures. Allison, her eyes closed, lips parted. Nathan, his hand on her thigh. Michael squeezed the phone so hard that the screen cracked. He didn't cry, no tears came. Instead of them, something dark and cold, like steel, grew. Fury, not the kind that makes you scream or break furniture. The one that matures slowly, plans, waits. Michael started the car and drove back to town. He won't come home. Not today. He rented a room in a cheap motel on the outskirts, where no one asked questions. Lying on the hard bed, with the neon sign humming outside the window, he began to think. Not about forgiveness, not about reconciliation, about how to make them pay. Allison, Nathan, everyone who knew and was silent. He opened his laptop and started searching. Nathan's social networks, his profile on the company website, his connections. Michael wasn't a hacker, but he was methodical. Every piece of information, post, photo, comment was a building block in the foundation of his plan. He didn't know how far he would go, but one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. The rain beat on the motel windows, and in this rhythm Michael heard the echo of his pulse. The crack in his reality had become an abyss, and he wasn't going to fall into it alone. Michael spent the night making a list. Names, dates, places. He remembered Allison mentioning trips with Nathan, work trips to Seattle, San Francisco. He checked her email since she hadn't changed her password for years. There were letters that he had not noticed before. Hotel reservations, bills for dinners for two, correspondence where Nathan called her sweetheart. Every word was like a blow. By morning his migraine had passed, but a cold clarity took its place. He won't come home until he's ready. He sent Allison a message. I'll be late at work. The project is on fire. I'll be late. She replied an hour later. Okay, don't overdo it. No questions, no worries. Her indifference only added fuel to the fire. Michael knew he had to be careful. Allison was smart, and Nathan seemed to be influential. But he had an advantage. They didn't know that he knew, and he was going to use it to destroy their world the same way they destroyed his. Michael Cannon sat in a dimly lit motel room where the smell of damp mixed with the cheap aroma of detergent. The neon sign outside the window flickered, casting red and blue reflections on the walls. His laptop, open on the creaky table, was the only source of light other than the weak flashlight outside the window. On the screen is Nathan Collins' LinkedIn profile, his smug smile, and his list of awards and publications. Michael looked at the photograph, and something dark, cold, like steel, grew in his chest. He had not slept all night, but the fatigue had receded, replaced by rage, which was now not chaotic, but sharp as a blade. He went through the memories of his marriage like old blueprints, trying to find the moment when everything went wrong. Their first meeting was at university, when Allison, with her bright eyes and cheeky smile, burst into his life like a ray of sunshine. Their nights in a tiny apartment where they shared dreams and laughed at their poverty. Aiden's birth, when he first felt like his life had meaning. The birth of Sophia, her tiny hands hugging his finger. He remembered how Allison supported him when he worked nights, dreaming of projects that would change the world. How proud she was of him when he got his first job at an architecture firm. When did it disappear? Maybe when he started bringing home fatigue instead of ideas, when her marketing career took off and his dreams were stuck in the mire of routine, or when they stopped having heart-to-heart conversations, replacing conversations with to-do lists. He remembered her distant looks at dinner, her habit of checking her phone while he talked about work. I remembered how she started mentioning Nathan. He's a genius at strategy. He knows how to get a crowd going. Michael didn't attach any importance to it at the time. He trusted her, loved her, and she chose someone else. The pain was sharp, but the rage was stronger. He saw her face, not the one at their wedding, but the one in the photographs in the evidence folder. Allison, eyes closed, with a smile he hadn't seen in years, in Nathan's arms. These pictures, taken yesterday in their bedroom, were not just proof of her betrayal. They were the fuel for his determination. He transferred them to an encrypted folder on the cloud, also named Evidence. This was his first step, his foundation. He wasn't going to make a scene, scream, or break furniture. It would be too simple, too weak. Allison and Nathan deserved better. They deserved destruction, methodical and inevitable. Michael opened the messenger on his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen, but he knew what he had to do. He typed out the message, each word like a hammer blow. "You're scum. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I saw you with Nathan. In our bed. You will pay for this betrayal, and so will he. Goodbye." He reread the text. He was rude, poisonous, but precise. This was not a cry of despair, it was a declaration of war. He hit send, and then, without giving himself time to change his mind, he blocked her number. Allison no longer existed in his world. Their marriage, their 20 years, their family, it all turned to ashes. He didn't want to hear her excuses, her tears, her lies. She made her choice, and now he will make his. Michael leaned back in his chair, feeling his rage give way to cold clarity. He didn't know what she would do when she read the message. Will he panic? Will he call Nathan? Will she run to the children to be the first to tell her version? It didn't matter anymore. He was no longer her husband. He was a man with a mission. He went back through his memories, trying to figure out where he had gone wrong. Maybe he was too predictable, too immersed in family, in work, in stability, which she seemed to despise. He gave up dreams of great projects for the sake of a mortgage, for the sake of good schools, for the sake of her. He thought it was right, that this was what she wanted. But now he saw the truth. She wanted fire, and he gave her ashes. Nathan Collins, with his expensive suits and easy smile, was the one who lit the fire, and Michael hated him for it. But he hated himself more for not noticing, for allowing it to happen. He opened his laptop and started searching. Nathan's social networks, his profile on the company website, publications in business magazines. Nathan was a marketing star, married with 2 children, living in the upscale West Hills. His life looked perfect, but Michael knew that underneath that glossy surface lay weaknesses. There are always weaknesses. He started making a list. Names, dates, places. He remembered Allison mentioning trips with Nathan, work trips to Seattle, San Francisco. He checked her email, since she hadn't changed her password for years. There were letters that he had not noticed before. Hotel reservations, bills for dinners for 2, correspondence where Nathan called her sweetheart. Every word was like a blow. Michael saved the screenshots, adding them to the evidence folder. He didn't know how he would use this information, but it was his weapon. He worked methodically, like an architect drawing out a plan. He wasn't a hacker, but he was patient. Every piece of information, post, photo, comment was a brick in the foundation of his revenge. The phone vibrated. New message from an unknown number. You did the right thing. She doesn't deserve you. Continue. Michael stared at the screen, his pulse quickening. Who is this? Allison's colleague? Her friend? Someone who hates Nathan? Or just an observer playing his own games? He didn't answer, but the message gave him a strange confidence. Someone knew. Someone was on his side. He thought about the children. Aiden and Sophia were at home when he left. They didn't see him, didn't know he was there. He imagined Allison returning to her usual role, cooking dinner, asking about their homework, kissing them goodnight. This thought caused a new attack of rage. How could she? How could she destroy their family and then pretend that everything was fine? He wanted to call them, tell them the truth, but he stopped himself. Not now. They should not become pawns in this war. But he knew that the truth would still reach them, and this would be another blow. Michael stood up and walked around the room, his steps echoing loudly in the silence. He felt like a stranger in his own life. The man who only yesterday was drinking coffee in his kitchen was now a ghost planning destruction. He stopped at the mirror above the chest of drawers. His face was pale, his eyes were red, but determination burned in them. He didn't recognize himself, but that was good. The Michael who trusted, loved, forgave was dead. The new Michael was different. He was a hunter. He returned to his laptop and began searching for information about Nathan's wife, Claire Collins. She was a lawyer, specializing in corporate law. She had an Instagram profile full of photos from fundraisers and family vacations. Michael looked at her smile, as polished as her husband's, and wondered, did she know? Does he suspect? He saved several of her posts where she mentioned Nathan, adding them to his collection. If Nathan destroys his family, then Michael will destroy him. And Claire may be the key. By morning his eyes were burning with fatigue, but he did not stop. He wrote a letter to himself, a list of steps, like a draft of a project. First, collect more evidence. Second, find a way to get them to Claire Collins. Third, hit Nathan's career. Fourth, make Allison regret every choice she makes. He didn't know how far he would go, but one thing was clear: he would not back down. The rain outside the window died down, and the first rays of gray light broke through the clouds. Michael closed his laptop and lay down on the bed without undressing. He was awake, but his mind was calm. The crack in his reality had become an abyss, and he was building a bridge across it, a bridge of pain, rage, and calculation. Allison and Nathan thought they could steal his life and get away with it. They were wrong. Michael Cannon sat in a cramped lawyer's office on the 6th floor of an old building in downtown Portland. The windows looked out onto the great wall of the neighboring house, and the air smelled of dust and coffee from a cheap coffee maker. Across from him, at a table littered with folders and sticky notes, sat Catherine Wilson, a woman in her 50s with sharp cheekbones and a gaze that could cut glass. Her record in divorce cases was impeccable. She didn't just win, she destroyed. Michael found her through a colleague who had been divorced a year before and still thanked Catherine for leaving his ex empty-handed. "So, Mr. Cannon," Catherine began, tapping her pen on her notepad, "you want a divorce. Tell me what happened. And don't skimp on the details. The more I know, the better I can protect you." Michael clenched his fists under the table. He wasn't ready to lay it all out. The pain was too fresh, and the words seemed like a betrayal of who he was just a week ago. But he forced himself to speak. He talked about 20 years of marriage, how their love faded, about his work, about his children, and then about the day he came home and saw Allison and Nathan Collins in their bedroom. His voice shook, but he held on as he described the photographs that were now stored in the evidence folder. Catherine listened in silence, her face unreadable, but her eyes narrowed when he mentioned the photographs. "Did you save these pictures?" she asked, putting down her pen. "Yes, on your phone and in the cloud, encrypted." "Fine. This is a strong trump card. Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, so her cheating won't directly affect the division of property, but we can use it for leverage. If she wants to fight for custody or child support, these pictures will make her back down." Catherine made a note. "What about finances? Joint accounts, real estate, debts?" Michael pulled out a folder of documents: bank statements, mortgage agreements, tax returns. He prepared for this meeting all night, sitting in a motel under the hum of a neon sign. He talked about the house in Laurelhurst, their joint account, the investments he and Allison were saving for their children's college. Catherine nodded, her fingers quickly flipping through the papers. "Is your goal to protect your assets and custody of your children?" She clarified. "Yes, Aiden is 16, Sophia is 13. I don't want them to live with her. Not after what she did, and I don't want her to get more than she deserves." Catherine looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Cannon, I understand your anger, but courts in Oregon often favor the mother, especially if she does not pose a threat to the children. We need to prove that you are the best caregiver. Does your wife work? Is she stable?" "She's a marketer. He makes good money. But her moral side is in question. This will help us. We will begin with a temporary division of assets and request custody based on your stability. You didn't lose your job, you don't abuse alcohol, you don't beat your children." She asked the question with a slight smile, but her eyes were serious. "No, I just want to protect them, and myself." Catherine nodded. "Then we will begin. I'll have the documents ready by the end of the week. But Michael, listen, don't do anything stupid. No scenes, no threats. If she tries to contact you, don't respond. Everything is through me. Got it?" He nodded, although everything was boiling inside. Threats? He had already sent Allison that message, calling her scum and promising retribution. But Catherine didn't need to know that. He signed the contract, left a check for the advance, and left the office, feeling the first brick of his plan fall into place. Outside, the rain had given way to the light drizzle typical of Portland in April. Michael got into the car and checked his phone. 5 missed calls from Allison and 3 voicemails. He didn't listen to them. Her number was blocked, but she apparently called from someone else. He erased the notifications, his fingers trembling with the desire to open the messages, to hear her voice, excuses, tears, lies. But he didn't give in. Allison no longer had power over him. He went to a cafe in the Pearl area where he could work without attracting attention. Ordering a black coffee, he opened his laptop and continued digging up information about Nathan Collins. He had learned more about him in the last 2 days than in all the years Allison had mentioned his name. Nathan was a senior strategist at the marketing firm where Allison worked. 42 years, married to Laura Collins, a corporate lawyer. They have 2 children, a 10-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. Their West Hills home was worth $2 million, according to real estate records. Nathan has hosted a branding podcast, published articles in Forbes, and regularly appears at conferences. His life was as glossy as the advertisements he created. But Michael was looking for cracks. He found Laura's Instagram profile, a well-groomed blonde, always wearing the perfect suit or dress for charity events. Her posts were full of family photos: Nathan with the kids on the beach, Nathan with a glass of wine at sunset. But in recent publications, there has been less of Nathan, and her signatures have become shorter, colder. Michael sensed that she might be suspicious, or at least not as happy as she wants to seem. He decided to strike first. At the motel, he created an anonymous email account through a secure browser. I composed a letter, short and merciless. Dear Miss Collins, your husband, Nathan, is sleeping with my wife. This has been happening for several months now. I am attaching evidence. You deserve to know the truth. Sincerely, a man who knows. He attached 2 photographs from the evidence folder, the ones where Allison and Nathan's faces were clearly visible. He reread the letter, his heart pounding. It was a risk. Laura could have ignored him. She could have blamed him. She could have even told Nathan. But Michael was counting on her reaction. If she is a lawyer, she will not remain silent. She will start digging, asking questions, and this will be the first blow to Nathan's ideal life. He pressed send and exhaled. The letter went away, and there was no turning back. He imagined Laura opening it, her face changing, her looking at Nathan with different eyes. This was the beginning. Not the end, but the first step towards Nathan feeling the same pain that Michael felt. In the evening, Michael returned to the motel, where the smell of dampness became almost familiar. He checked his phone: 2 more missed calls from an unfamiliar number, probably Allison. She didn't give up, but he wasn't going to give her a chance. He thought about the children. Aiden and Sophia were home, in a world he could no longer call his own. He wanted to call them, to hear their voices, but what would he say? Your mother betrayed us? I left, but everything will be fine. He wasn't ready. Not now. Instead, he continued to gather information. He found old articles about the company where Allison and Nathan worked. One of them mentioned a major deal that Nathan closed, but comments under the article hinted at unethical methods, pressure on clients, dubious contracts. Michael saved the links and added them to his collection. If Nathan played dirty in business, this could be another lever. He also started following Allison's social media. Her profile was public, and she continued to post as if nothing had happened. Photos from morning yoga, quotes about inspiration, selfies with coffee. This pissed him off more than her calls. How could she pretend nothing happened? He saved a few posts where she mentioned Nathan, nothing explicit, but enough to add to his file. By midnight, Michael lay down on the bed without undressing. His mind was clear as a blueprint. He saw the plan, step by step. Divorce, protecting the children, destroying Nathan, punishing Allison. He didn't know how far he would go, but one thing was clear: he wouldn't stop. The rain began again, pounding on the motel windows, and in its rhythm Michael heard his pulse echo. He closed his eyes, but sleep did not come. Instead, he saw her face not loving, not like at their wedding, but like in the photographs. And he knew that he would do everything to make her regret it. Michael Cannon sat on the edge of the hard motel bed, staring at the laptop screen where new data on Nathan Collins flickered. He found an old Twitter post where someone hinted at unethical dealings by Nathan's company and saved it in his evidence folder. Outside, the rain pattered on the asphalt and the neon motel sign flickered, casting red reflections on the walls. It was already past midnight, but sleep did not come. His mind was too busy creating a plan like a blueprint. Every step, every angle, every blow had to be precise. A sudden knock on the door made him jump. He froze, his heart pounding. Nobody knew he was here. He chose this motel on the outskirts of Portland precisely for its anonymity cash instead of cards, a receptionist who doesn't ask questions. The knocking was repeated, louder, more insistent. Michael stood up, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. His stomach clenched. Allison. Her dark hair was wet from the rain, her face was pale, her eyes were red. She knew where he was. Michael, open up. Her voice trembled, but there was a mixture of despair and anger in it. I know you're here. We need to talk. He stood pressed against the door, his hand clenching the doorknob. Part of him wanted to open up, to release all the rage he had been holding in since the day he saw her with Nathan. The other part, the one that was cold and calculating, whispered that this was a trap. She came to manipulate, to lie, to return him to the life that he had already buried. But it was impossible to ignore her. She won't leave. And perhaps this was a chance to tell her to her face that their marriage was dead. Michael unlocked the door and opened it, but did not step aside. Allison stood in the rain. Her coat was wet. Her mascara was smudged under her eyes. She looked pitiful, but he felt no pity, only cold. What are you doing here? His voice was even, but there was steel in every word. I need to talk. She stepped forward, but he did not move, blocking the passage. Please, Michael, give me 5 minutes. He was silent, looking at her. Her face, which he had once loved, now seemed alien. He saw not Allison, with whom he shared 20 years, but the woman from those photographs, her smile in Nathan's arms. But he stepped back, letting her inside. She walked in, leaving wet footprints on the thin carpet. Michael closed the door, but remained standing with his arms crossed over his chest. How did you know where I was? He asked, not hiding his suspicion. Allison looked away, fiddling with her coat sleeve. I asked Rachel from your office. She said it was urgent. She saw you looking for motels on the computer. Michael clenched his teeth. Rachel, his colleague who was always too nosy. He made a mental note to be careful. Allison, meanwhile, looked around the room's shabby wallpaper, cheap furniture, and open laptop. Her eyes lingered on the screen, but she said nothing. Speak, Michael said. You have 5 minutes. She took a deep breath, her hands shaking. I received your message. I know what you saw, and I won't lie. This is true. I'm having an affair with Nathan. For several months now. Her voice broke, but she continued, looking at the floor. I didn't want you to find out like that. I was going to tell you, but things went too far. Michael felt the blood rush to his temples. Her confession was not a surprise, but every word cut like a knife. He was waiting for excuses, and they were not long in coming. I was lonely, Michael. Her voice became louder, a note of accusation appeared in it. You didn't notice it, but I was there. You were always busy with work, with children, with your drawings that never came to fruition. You stopped seeing me. We lived like neighbors, not like husband and wife. I wanted to feel wanted, alive. Nathan, he gave it to me. Michael clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He wanted to scream, to say that her loneliness was not an excuse, that he sacrificed everything for her and the children. But he forced himself to remain silent, his gaze as cold as concrete. Are you finished? He asked when she fell silent, wiping away her tears. No, she stepped closer, her eyes pleading. I know what I did was terrible. I hate myself for this, but I don't want to lose our family. Aiden, Sophia, they shouldn't have to suffer because of my mistakes. We can fix everything. I'll end everything with Nathan. We can go to a psychologist, start over. Please, Michael." He looked at her, and there was nothing but emptiness in her words. She talked about family, about children, but not about him. Not about them. She wanted to maintain the facade, not their love. He shook his head slowly. "You think you can just apologize and everything will go away?" His voice was quiet, but rage rang in it. "You slept with him in our bed, Allison. In our house. You lied to me, to the children, to everyone. Your loneliness. This is not an excuse. I was there every day, building this life for us. And you chose him. I didn't choose him." She almost screamed, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake, Michael. I was weak and stupid. But I love you. I've always loved you." Love. He grinned, and the sound was colder than the rain outside the window. "You don't know what it is. Love is not a lie, not betrayal, not your Nathan, who has you while I'm at work. You ruined everything, Allison. And now you want me to pretend it didn't happen. No," she cried, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook, but Michael didn't move. He felt no pity, only relief. Saying it out loud, calling her betrayal by name, felt like lifting a weight. He was free from illusions. "I'm filing for divorce," he continued, his voice firm. "I already spoke with the lawyer. I'll take the children, the house, everything I can. You don't deserve anything we've built, and don't try to stop me. I have proof. Photos. You know what I mean." Her eyes widened and her tears froze. You don't dare use them. This will destroy me, Michael. Think about the children. You should have been thinking about them when you called Nathan into our bedroom." He snapped. "Now get out. We're done." Allison looked at him, her face a mixture of shock and pain. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came. She turned, grabbed the doorknob, and walked out, slamming the door. Her steps faded in the corridor, mixing with the sound of rain. Michael stood motionless, listening to her car drive away. When everything was quiet, he exhaled. For the first time in days, he felt relieved. Not joy, not victory, but clarity. He made a choice, and the choice was his. He returned to his laptop, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Allison knew where he was, and that was the problem. He should be more careful. He checked his phone, 3 more missed calls from an unfamiliar number, probably hers. He blocked that number too, but knew she wouldn't stop. She will try to reach out, manipulate, and use children. But he won't give in. Michael opened the evidence folder and looked at the pictures. They still cut, but now the pain was different, not sharp, but dull, like an old bruise. He knew he would use them if he had to. Not only against Allison, but also against Nathan. He thought of Laura Collins, who might already have received his anonymous letter. I imagined how she opened the pictures, how her world was collapsing, like his was collapsing. It was fair. Nathan must not go unpunished. He lay down on the bed without undressing. The rain beat on the windows, and in this rhythm Michael heard his pulse. He thought about the children. Aiden and Sophia were home, in a world he could no longer call his own. He must talk to them, but not now. First, he will protect their future from Allison, from her lies, from the pain she caused them. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in days he managed to sleep, albeit briefly. His determination was his shield, and he wasn't going to let it down. Michael Cannon sat in his car in the parking lot of his Laurelhurst home, looking at familiar windows that now seemed foreign. The rain had stopped, leaving behind damp air and puddles that reflected the dim light of the street lamps. It was 7 in the evening, and he knew Aiden and Sophia were home. He hadn't seen them since the day he found Allison with Nathan, and every hour without them felt like a blow. But he couldn't put it off any longer. They deserved the truth, or at least the part of it that he could tell without completely destroying their world. He got out of the car, his steps echoing loudly on the wet asphalt. The house he had once designed in his dreams was now a battlefield. Allison was probably inside, but he had arranged through Catherine, his lawyer, that he would speak to the children privately. Allison agreed, perhaps out of fear that he would use pictures from the evidence folder. Michael had no intention of showing them to the children, that would be too cruel, but he held them as a bargaining chip to keep her from interfering. He knocked on the door, and a minute later Sophia opened it. Her brown hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, and her eyes flashed with a mixture of surprise and relief. She rushed to him, hugging him so tightly that Michael felt a lump in his throat. "Dad, where have you been?" Her voice trembled, and she buried her face in his jacket. "I'm sorry, honey," he stroked her head, trying to control himself. "I needed to sort things out. But I'm here." Sophia pulled away, her eyes shining with tears. "Mom said that you were quarreling. This is true?" Michael nodded, not trusting his voice. He looked over her shoulder and saw Aiden standing in the living room. The 16-year-old son looked at him with cold anger, his arms crossed over his chest, headphones hanging around his neck. Allison was nowhere to be seen. She had probably gone upstairs, as they had agreed. Michael entered, closing the door behind him. The air in the house was heavy, filled with tension. "We need to talk," he said, trying to sound calm. "Let's go to the kitchen." Sophia nodded and pulled his hand, but Aiden remained in place, his gaze like a challenge. "I don't want any conversations," he muttered. "You left us. What else do you want to say?" Michael felt the rage he had been suppressing flare up, but he suppressed it. Aiden didn't know the truth. He was a child, caught up in the pain that adults forced upon him. "Aiden, please, this is important, for both of you." Aiden snorted, but followed them anyway. They sat down at the kitchen table, where a week ago they had all had dinner together, pretending to be a family. Now the table seemed too big, and the silence was deafening. Sophia fiddled with the hem of her t-shirt, her eyes darting between Michael and Aiden. Aiden looked away, his jaw tense. Michael took a deep breath. He rehearsed this conversation in his head dozens of times, but the words still felt wrong. "I know the last few days have been strange," he began, "and it's my fault for not explaining earlier. But I have to be honest with you. Your mother and I are getting a divorce." Sophia gasped, her hand freezing. Aiden turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "What?" His voice was sharp, like a blow. "Are you serious?" "Yes," Michael tried to speak firmly, although everything was shrinking inside. "Our marriage, it hasn't worked for a long time. My mother and I decided that it would be better for everyone." "Better for everyone?" Aiden jumped up, his chair creaking on the floor. "You left, Dad. You just disappeared. And now you come back and say that you are ruining our family? You decided it, not Mom." "Aiden, calm down." Michael raised his hand, but his son did not listen. "No, you can't just destroy everything." Aiden slammed his fist on the table, his face turning red. "It's because of you, right? You were always so detached, always in your work, in your drawings. Mom was right when she said that you can't see us." Michael felt Aiden's words cut in like a knife. He wanted to tell the truth about Allison's betrayal, about Nathan, about the pictures he kept. But he couldn't. Not like that. Not now. "That's not true, Aiden," he said, trying to remain calm. "I was always here for you. And I'm not going anywhere. The divorce is between me and my mother, but you and Sophia are my life." "Your life?" Aiden laughed, but it was a bitter, angry sound. "You abandoned us. Mom cried all week, and where were you? In some motel, like a coward? You ruined everything, and now you want me to pretend everything is fine?" "Aiden, stop it!" Sophia screamed, her voice trembling. "Don't yell at Dad. It's not his fault." Aiden turned to her, his eyes sparkling. "Do you even understand what's going on, Sophie? He's gone. He doesn't want to be with us. Are you protecting him?" "I don't want you to quarrel." Sophia began to cry, her face wrinkled. "I want everything to be as before." Michael stood up, walked around the table, and hugged Sophia. She buried herself in his chest, her tears soaking his shirt. He looked at Aiden, who stood there, breathing heavily, his fists clenched. "Aiden, I understand that you are angry, and you have the right. But I didn't leave you. I walked away from a situation that no longer works. I want you to be happy, and I will do everything to make this happen." Are you happy? Aiden shook his head. His voice became quieter, but there was so much pain in it that Michael felt a pang of guilt. You don't know what this means. I'm leaving. Before Michael could stop him, Aiden grabbed his jacket and ran out of the house, slamming the door. Michael wanted to run after him, but Sophia clung to him, her sobs growing louder. He knelt down, hugging her tighter. Everything will be fine, honey, he whispered, although he didn't believe it himself. I'm here. I'll always be here. Sophia sniffled, her voice barely audible. You won't leave? How's Aiden? Never. Michael looked into her eyes, trying to put all his determination into his words. You and Aiden are the most important thing in my life. No matter what happens, I will be there. She nodded, but her gaze was full of fear. Michael felt his heart breaking. He couldn't protect them from this pain, but he could give them confidence that it wouldn't go away. He sat down with her on the couch, letting her snuggle against him until her tears dried. She was silent, and this silence was heavier than any words. An hour later, Sophia finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Dad, I'm afraid. What if you and Mom hate each other? What if I lose you? Michael squeezed her hand, trying not to show how her words hurt. You will never lose me, Sophie. I promise. No matter what happens between me and Mom, you and Aiden are my family, and I will fight for you. She looked at him. Her eyes were the same as Allison's when she was younger, and it confused him for a moment. But he pushed that memory away. Sophia was not Allison. She was his daughter, and he would not let her down. Can I stay with you today? She asked, her voice trembling. I don't want to be here without you. Michael nodded, although he knew it would complicate things. Certainly. We will find a place where we can be together. But I need to find Aiden. Do you know where he could have gone? Sophia shook her head. He sometimes goes to his friend Zach, but he doesn't tell me. Michael took out his phone and texted Aiden, I know you're angry, but I love you. Please let me know you're okay. He didn't expect an answer, but he sent a message, hoping that his son would at least read it. He packed up a few of Sophia's things, a backpack of clothes, her favorite book, and took her to a new motel, away from where Allison found him. The administrator, an elderly woman with a tired look, did not ask any questions. Michael settled Sophia on the bed, turning on the TV to distract her. She fell asleep an hour later, curled up under the covers, and he sat next to her, looking at her face. Her calm was fragile, and he knew he had to be stronger than ever. Later that night, he checked his phone. Aiden didn't respond, but there was a message from Catherine. Allison contacted me. I want to discuss custody. Get ready to fight. Michael clenched his teeth. Allison wouldn't go down without a fight, but he was ready. He opened the evidence folder on his laptop, looking at the pictures. They were his weapons, but he hoped he wouldn't have to use them against children. He thought about Laura Collins, who might have already received his letter. If she starts asking Nathan questions, it will be another blow to his world. Michael lay down on the second bed without undressing. The rain began again, pounding against the windows like a metronome of his determination. He promised Sophia that he would not leave, and he would keep that promise. But he also promised himself that Allison and Nathan would pay for everything, and he won't stop until he gets it done. Allison Cannon sat at her desk in the office of a marketing firm in downtown Portland, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The laptop screen showed a presentation for a new client, but the words blurred before my eyes. She couldn't concentrate. The air in the open office, usually filled with the hum of conversation and the clatter of keys, today seemed heavy, saturated with whispers and glances that she could feel behind her. Her colleagues, who just yesterday were smiling and discussing plans for the weekend, now avoided her eyes or glanced at each other when they thought she wasn't looking. Allison knew why. Rumors of her affair with Nathan Collins, the firm's senior strategist, spread like wildfire. She wasn't sure who had let them in. Perhaps someone had seen them together at a company dinner that was more than just a business meeting. Perhaps it was Laura, Nathan's wife, who received an anonymous letter with photographs. Or even Michael, her husband, whose poisonous message still burned in her mind. You're scum. You will pay for this betrayal. Whoever it was, her secret, which she had guarded so carefully, was now in plain sight, and every whisper in the office felt like a blow. She tried to carry herself as always. Chin held high, perfect makeup, business suit. But inside, she was falling apart. Her marriage collapsed. Michael filed for divorce. Aiden left home, and Sophia, her little girl, looked at her with pain and misunderstanding. And now work the place where she felt strong and confident has turned into a minefield. Allison clenched her hand, her knuckles turning white. She wanted to scream, to tell everyone to stop staring, but that would only make things worse. Allison. The voice of Linda, her assistant, pulled her out of her thoughts. Brian wants to see you in his office. Right now. Allison nodded, her stomach clenching. Brian, their CEO, rarely called employees out for no reason. She stood up, squared her shoulders, and walked across the office, feeling the eyes of her colleagues follow her. Someone pretended to be busy, staring at the monitor. Others did not hide their curiosity. Their eyes sparkled like those of vultures. She noticed Sarah, the copywriter, whispering with a designer, and their conversation ended abruptly when she walked past. Allison clenched her teeth. She hated this feeling humiliation, as if she had been stripped naked in front of everyone. Brian's office was in the corner of the office, with large windows overlooking rainy Portland. He sat at the table, his balding head glistening under the lamplight. When Allison entered, he pointed to a chair without smiling. "Sit down, Allison," he said, his voice level but steely. "We need to talk." She sat up, her hands folded in her lap to hide her trembling. "Of course, Brian. About what?" He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the table. "I'll be straightforward. There are rumors in the office about you and Nathan, and frankly, they create distraction. Clients are starting to ask questions, which is the last thing we need before launching a new campaign." Allison felt the blood drain from her face. She opened her mouth to protest, but Brian raised his hand to stop her. "I don't want to know the details of your personal life," he continued, "but I can't ignore how it affects work. You're one of the best on the team, Allison, but right now your reputation is on the line. And Nathan, too. I've already talked to him, and now I'm talking to you. You need to deal with this. Fast. This is personal, Brian." Her voice trembled, but she tried to hold on. "I don't understand why this should be about work. I carry out my duties as always. The personal becomes professional when it interferes with business," he snapped. "Clients do not want to work with people whose names are associated with gossip. And frankly, I don't want our company to be associated with drama. Think about what you can do to improve the situation, and do it." Allison nodded, her throat tightening. She stood up, her movements mechanical, and left the office. The office became quieter, or so she thought. She returned to her desk, feeling the walls closing in around her. Her phone was face down, but she knew there were no messages from Michael. She tried to reach him, wrote, begged for a conversation, but he ignored her. And now her work, her last bastion, was collapsing under the weight of her mistakes. She opened her laptop, but instead of working, she started scrolling through old photos in the cloud. Family photos from Cannon Beach where she, Michael, Aiden, and Sophia laughed while building sand castles. Her eyes filled with tears. How did she get to this point? She remembered the first time Nathan had touched her hand at that conference in Seattle, how his attention had filled her life with sparks she hadn't felt in so long. She knew it was wrong, but she didn't stop. And now her world was falling apart, and she couldn't blame anyone but herself. Meanwhile, Michael sat in his Pearl office, trying to concentrate on the blueprints for the pharmacy complex. His desk was littered with sketches, but his thoughts were far away with Aiden, who was not responding to messages, with Sophia, who slept in the motel, cuddling her old stuffed dog, and with Allison, whose face he couldn't get out of his head despite all his rage. He noticed that the atmosphere in the office had changed. Rachel, his colleague who had unwittingly given Allison his location, now looked at him with sympathy, her smile too soft, almost pitiful. The other employees, usually talkative, fell silent as he walked by. Even his boss, John, tapped him on the shoulder in the morning and said, "Hang in there, Mike. without explaining what it was about. Michael knew that the rumors had reached here too. Portland was a big city, but news traveled quickly in professional circles. Someone, perhaps a colleague of Allison's, perhaps a mutual acquaintance, had started talking about his divorce, about his infidelity. And now he was not just Michael Cannon, the architect. He was that guy whose wife sleeps with someone else. This feeling of isolation was new and painful. Michael is used to being invisible, disappearing into the routine of work and family. But now he was an object of pity, and it infuriated him more than he expected. He wanted to scream that he didn't need their sympathy, that he could handle it, that he would make Allison and Nathan pay. But he was silent because he knew that any word would only fuel the gossip. He opened his laptop and checked the anonymous email from which he had sent a letter to Laura Collins. There was no response, but he noticed that her Instagram had become private. This was a sign she had received the pictures and something was happening. Michael imagined Laura looking at the photographs, her world collapsing like his. He didn't feel guilty. Nathan deserved it. And Allison. She reaped what she sowed. The phone vibrated. Message from Catherine, his lawyer. Allison hired a lawyer. Prepare for custody negotiations. Don't communicate with her directly. Michael clenched his teeth. Allison wouldn't give up, but he was ready for a fight. He replied, "Understood. Keep me posted." He stood up to pour some coffee, but stopped at the window, looking out at the wet streets of Portland. His reflection in the glass was tired but determined. Gossip, looks, whispers, it was all noise. His goal was clear: protect the children, destroy Nathan, make Allison pay, and he will not stop, even if the whole city whispers behind his back. Michael Cannon stood at the window of his new office, a tiny rented room on the second floor of an old building in Portland's Albina neighborhood. The window looked out onto a busy street where cyclists maneuvered between cars and coffee shops buzzed with morning customers. The inside smelled of fresh paint and coffee he'd brewed in a cheap coffee maker. There were sketches on the table, not dull blueprints of pharmacy complexes, but sketches of something living, bold, an environmentally sustainable residential complex, his first attempt in years to realize the dream he had buried for the sake of stability. 2 weeks ago, he took a step that seemed crazy. He retired from the company where he had worked for almost 20 years. The conversation with the boss, John, was short. Michael simply said that he couldn't draw parking lots and shopping centers anymore. John patted him on the shoulder and wished him luck, but there was doubt in his gaze. Michael didn't blame him. At 45, leaving a secure job, especially in the midst of a divorce and family crisis, was a risk. But he felt that this was the only way to regain control, to remind himself of who he was. The decision came at night, after another sleepless shift at the motel where he now lived with Sophia. Aiden still hadn't returned home, ignoring his messages, and the pain was like an open wound. But Michael knew he couldn't sit and wait. He had to move forward, not only for himself, but also for the sake of his children. He remembered his old sketches, ideas for buildings that could change the city, inspire people. He once dreamed of projects that would combine beauty and functionality, nature and architecture. Allison then supported him, calling him a genius. Now her betrayal fuels his determination to prove that he is still capable of great things. Michael rented this office for little money, using his savings that he had not yet used for the divorce. He bought a drawing board, a laptop with new software, and began working on a project he called Green Horizon. It was a residential complex with solar panels, green roofs, a rainwater harvesting system, and public spaces where people could feel connected to nature. Every sketch, every line was like a breath that brought him back to life. He worked at night while Sophia slept at the motel, her presence reminding him why he was doing this. But he knew that enthusiasm alone was not enough. He needed connections, investors, and a team. So he registered for a professional event, a conference on sustainable architecture, held in downtown Portland. He had not been to such events for years, but this was a chance to express himself and find like-minded people. He put on his best suit, the one he bought for his anniversary with Allison, and went there, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The conference took place in a modern exhibition center, where glass walls let in the soft light of an overcast day. The room was full of architects, designers, engineers, people whose business cards were full of fashionable terms like sustainability and innovation. Michael felt a little out of place, but his determination was stronger. He walked between stands, listened to presentations, and took notes. His eye was drawn to projects that resembled his own ideas, and this fueled his enthusiasm. During one of the coffee breaks, he noticed a woman standing at a stand with models of landscape gardens. Her name was Claire Wilson, as the sign said, a landscape designer with 10 years of experience. She was slightly younger than him, with short red hair and an energy that seemed to charge the air around her. She explained to a group of listeners how her projects integrate native plants and water treatment systems to create spaces that breathe with the city. Michael listened, standing aside, and felt how her words awakened something long forgotten in him. When the crowd dispersed, he approached her. "An interesting approach," he said, pointing to a model of a garden with cascading waterfalls. "Is this for a residential complex?" Claire turned, her green eyes scanning him appraisingly. "Yes, for a project in Seattle. We want residents to feel like they are part of an ecosystem, not just renters." "What about you? Architect?" "Yes," Michael extended his hand. "Michael Cannon. I'm working on something similar. Residential complex with green roofs and public spaces." Her face lit up. "Seriously? This is my passion. Tell me." They started talking, and Michael was surprised at how easily the words flowed from him. He spoke about Green Horizon, his idea to make sustainability not just a buzzword, but a reality for the middle class. Claire listened, nodding, her questions pointed but inspiring. She suggested ideas for landscape integration, rooftop gardens, irrigation systems, areas for native birds. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and for the first time in months, Michael felt like he was not alone in his struggle. "You know," Claire said as they drank coffee by the window, "many architects talk about sustainability, but few are willing to take risks for it. You look like a person who is not afraid." Michael grinned, but there was bitterness in his smile. "I risk a lot. I just quit the company where I did parking lots. Now everything is on the line." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't judge. "It's brave, and a little crazy. But if you believe in your project, it's worth it. Would you like me to look at your sketches? Maybe I'll find some ideas for the landscape." Michael nodded, feeling a warmth spread in his chest. Not romantic, he was too broken for that, but professional, human. Claire was more than just a colleague. She was the spark that reminded him why he became an architect in the first place. They exchanged contact information, and Claire promised to send him her latest projects. When the conference ended, Michael returned to his office, his steps lighter than in the morning. He opened his laptop and began to refine the sketches, adding ideas that Claire had suggested. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving forward instead of drowning in pain and revenge. But the shadow of his past did not disappear. That evening, he received a message from Catherine, his lawyer. "Allison insists on joint custody. Her lawyer plays hardball. We need more evidence of her inappropriate behavior." Michael clenched his teeth. He knew the photographs in the evidence folder could destroy Allison in court, but using them against the mother of his children was a tough choice. He also thought about Laura Collins, who, judging by her silence, was either ignoring his letter or preparing her move against Nathan. Michael looked at the sketches of Green Horizon lying on the table. They were his anchor, his way of getting himself back. He couldn't let Allison or Nathan take that away from him. He wrote to Claire, attaching several sketches, and asked her opinion. Her answer came an hour later. "This is amazing, Michael. Let's meet next week and discuss the details. I have ideas." He smiled, closed his laptop, and lay down on the sofa in the office that was now his temporary home. Sophia was staying with his sister for the night, and he knew he had to find Aiden, but for now he allowed himself a moment of peace. The rain hammered on the windows, but for the first time the sound did not seem like a funeral march to him. It was the rhythm of a new beginning, and Michael was ready to follow it. Michael Cannon sat at the drawing board in his tiny office in Portland's Albina neighborhood, sketching out the details of Green Horizon, his sustainable housing project. The light of the table lamp snatched his sketches from the twilight. Green roofs, cascading gardens, solar panels. Work was his anchor, a way to keep him afloat while his personal life crumbled like a poorly designed building. But today his thoughts kept returning to Aiden. My son had not responded to messages for a week, and every day without him was like a crack in the foundation. The phone vibrated, jerking Michael out of his thoughts. Aiden's school number flashed on the screen. His heart sank. He answered, expecting the worst. "Mr. Cannon, this is Principal Hayes from Lincoln High School." The voice on the other end was dry, but with a hint of fatigue. "We need you to come. Aiden got into a fight at a school event. He's in my office." "A fight?" Michael stood up, already grabbing his jacket. "Is he okay?" "Physically, yes, but the situation is serious. Come as soon as possible." Michael threw his pencil on the desk and ran out of the office, not caring that he had left the door unlocked. The journey to school took 20 minutes, but it seemed like an eternity to him. Portland was bathed in the gray light of late morning, the streets glistening after the night's rain. His thoughts swirled around Aiden. Fight. This was out of character. Aiden was sullen, withdrawn, but not aggressive. Something happened, and Michael was afraid he knew exactly what. At the school, an old brick building with high windows, he was met by a secretary who showed him to the principal's office. Aiden was sitting on a chair against the wall, his dark hair disheveled, a fresh bruise on his cheekbone, and his t-shirt torn at the collar. Across from him, at the table, Director Hayes was leafing through some papers. The second guy, with a split lip and an angry look, sat in the corner with his mother, who whispered something in his ear. "Mr. Cannon," Hayes stood up, holding out his hand. "Thank you for coming. Sit down." Michael nodded, but his eyes were fixed on Aiden. The son did not look at him, staring at the floor, his fists clenched on his knees. Michael sat down, trying to hold back the wave of emotions: anxiety, anger, guilt. "What happened?" he asked, turning his gaze to the director. Hayes sighed. "Today we had an autumn festival, a charity event in the gym. Aiden and Tyler," he nodded at the second guy, "fought. According to witnesses, Tyler said something offensive and Aiden hit him. The fight was short, but both were injured. We do not tolerate violence, Mr. Cannon. Aiden has been suspended for 3 days, and we need to discuss the consequences." Michael looked at Aiden, who was still avoiding his gaze. "What did he say?" "Tyler. What provoked the fight?" Hayes hesitated, exchanging glances with Tyler's mother. "This is a delicate question. Apparently Tyler mentioned your family, something about your wife. I don't want to go into detail, but it was inappropriate." Michael felt the blood rush to his temples. He knew what we were talking about. Gossip about Allison's betrayal, about her affair with Nathan Collins, leaked into the school corridors. Children are cruel, especially teenagers. Tyler was probably repeating what he heard from his parents or friends, and Aiden, his son, couldn't stand it. "I'll figure it out," Michael said, his voice firm. "Can I pick it up?" "Yes," Hayes nodded. "But we expect you to discuss his behavior with him. And perhaps consider consulting a psychologist. Aiden, he's going through a difficult time." Michael didn't answer. He stood up and touched Aiden's shoulder. "Let's go." Aiden stood up silently, grabbed his backpack, and walked towards the exit without looking at his father. Tyler muttered something, but his mother shushed him. Michael felt the eyes of the director, the secretary, even the janitor in the corridor. The gossip had gotten here too, and he hated the feeling of having his life on display for everyone to see. In the car, Aiden sat in the passenger seat, crossing his arms and staring out the window. Michael started the engine, but did not move. He looked at his son, at his bruise, at the tense line of his jaw. He wanted to scream, to ask what he was thinking, but he knew that it wouldn't help. Aiden was not a child who could be told off. He was a teenager whose world was falling apart, and Michael knew that pain better than anyone. "What did Tyler say?" he asked finally, his voice quiet but firm. Aiden shrugged, not taking his eyes off the window. "Doesn't matter." "Important. Tell." Aiden gritted his teeth. his fingers digging into the sleeves of his sweatshirt. He said, "That mom is a whore, that everyone knows that she is sleeping with some guy, and that you are a weakling if you can't hold her." Michael gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. Aiden's words were like a blow, but not because of their rudeness, because they were the truth, or at least part of the truth that he tried to hide from the children. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "And you hit him," he said, not judging, just stating. "What was I supposed to do?" Aiden turned, his eyes sparkling with anger. "Stand by and listen to him sling mud at our family. Everyone was whispering there, 'Dad, everyone knows,' and you just walked away, left us to deal with this crap." Michael felt guilt and rage fighting in his chest. He wanted to say that he didn't leave, that he was fighting for them, but instead he turned off the engine and turned to his son. "I'm not going to lecture you, Aiden. You know that fighting is not the answer, but I understand why you did it, and I'm so damn sorry you had to go through that." Aiden blinked, his anger turning to surprise. He was clearly expecting screams and punishment, not this. Michael continued, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I didn't leave you or Sophia. I walked away from the lies, from the pain that your mother caused me. She made a choice that destroyed our family, and I can't pretend that everything is fine. But I'm not a weakling. I'm struggling, Aiden, for you and Sophia, for our lives, and I won't stop." Aiden looked at him, his eyes sparkling, but he didn't cry. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked more quietly. "Why did he just disappear?" Michael looked down, his fingers gripping the steering wheel. "Because I didn't know how. I saw her, with another man, in our house, and it broke me. I wanted to protect you, to prevent you from seeing this dirt. But I was wrong. I should have been more honest." Aiden was silent, his breathing heavy. Finally, he said, "I hate her. And I hated you too. Thought you abandoned us." "I know," Michael looked at him, his voice firm but soft, "and I don't blame you. But I'm here, Aiden, and I won't leave. Never." Aiden nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. He still looked angry, lost, but something new flashed in his eyes, not trust, but a hint of understanding. Michael started the car and drove, not to the motel, but to the diner on the outskirts where he and Aiden had once eaten burgers after his football games. He wanted to give his son a moment of normalcy, a chance to feel that all was not lost. At the diner, they sat in a corner booth, ordering burgers and milkshakes. Aiden ate in silence, but did not withdraw into himself as before. Michael decided to share something that could bring them closer together. "You know, I started a new project," he said, looking at his son. "Architectural, not just another shopping center. This is a residential complex, green, with gardens and everything. Something I dreamed about when I was younger." Aiden looked up, his eyebrow raised. "Seriously? You always said that this is unrealistic." "Yes, he did," Michael grinned, but there was bitterness in his smile. "But I'm tired of playing by someone else's rules. I want to build something that will remain after me. For you, for Sophia, to make you proud." Aiden nodded, his gaze softening. "That's cool, Dad. Is it true?" They finished their meal in silence, but it was not the same heavy silence as before. This was the first step, fragile but real. As they left the diner, Aiden said, "I don't want to go home. To Mom. Can I? With you?" Michael felt the lump in his throat melt away. "Certainly. We'll find a place. Together." They drove to the motel where Sophia was waiting. Aiden wasn't ready to forgive, but he was here, and it was a start. Michael knew that there was still a lot of pain ahead: divorce, trial, gossip. But at this moment, with his son next to him, he felt that his foundation, although cracked, was still holding together. Michael Cannon sat at a small table in the apartment he rented last week in Portland's Albina neighborhood. It was a modest home, one-bedroom, a living room with a shabby sofa, and a kitchen where the stove and refrigerator barely fit. But after weeks in the motel, the place felt like a palace. Sophia slept on the pull-out couch, Aiden slept on an air mattress in the corner, and Michael huddled in the bedroom, where his drawing board took up more space than the bed. The apartment was temporary, but it was theirs a refuge from the chaos of divorce, gossip, and pain that still haunted their family. Michael was cooking dinner tonight, spaghetti with sauce from a jar and a salad from the supermarket. The smell of tomatoes and basil filled the kitchen, mingling with the hum of an old radio tuned to a jazz station. Sophia sat at the table, bent over her sketchbook, her pencil quickly sliding across the paper. Aiden was in his room, headphones on his head, but at least he was back home after that fight at school, and that was a victory. Michael looked at his daughter, her concentrated face, and felt warmth in his chest. Sophia, despite everything, remained his light. The last weeks have changed her. When Michael picked her up from the house after talking to Allison, she was quiet, withdrawn, her eyes often sparkling with tears. But now there was a new energy in her, subtle but noticeable. She spent less time on her phone and didn't check social media every 5 minutes. Her room, more precisely, the corner of the living room where she kept her things, was littered with books and sketches, and not cosmetics and magazines, as before. Michael didn't ask what was going on, for fear of disturbing the change, but he saw his daughter growing up, and it filled him with pride. "Dad, the sauce is boiling," said Sophia, without looking up from the album. Michael turned around, noticing the tomato sauce bubbling on the stove. "Damn," he quickly turned down the heat and stirred with a spoon. "Thank you, Sophie. You are my savior." She smiled, her pencil stilling. "You're not much of a chef, are you?" "Hey, I'm trying," he winked, wiping his hands on a towel. "Your mother once taught me to cook, but it seems I was a bad student." The mention of Allison hung in the air, but Sophia didn't tense up like before. She simply nodded and went back to her drawing. Michael felt relieved. Talking about her mother was still a minefield, but Sophia seemed to be learning to cope. He set the table 3 plates, although Aiden rarely joined in, preferring to eat in his room. Michael called him, but as expected, there was no answer. He shrugged and sat down opposite Sophia, helping himself to the spaghetti. "What are you drawing?" he asked, nodding at her album. Sophia hesitated, her cheeks turning slightly pink. "Just something for school. Art project. We need to make a series of sketches about what is important to us." Michael raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "And what is important to you?" She closed the album, but didn't push him away. "Don't laugh, okay? This is family. You, me, Aiden, even if everything." "Well, it is not the same as before." His throat tightened. He wanted to hug her, but instead he just nodded. "That's cool, Sophie. Will you show me later?" "Maybe," she smiled, but her eyes were serious. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Certainly." She twirled the fork in her hands, her gaze lowering to the plate. Are you happy? Well, with your new project, I saw your drawings. They're cool. It's like you're different when you work on them." Michael put down his fork, her question taking him by surprise. Happy? He didn't think about it. The last few months had been a whirlwind of pain, rage, and struggle with Allison, with Nathan, with himself. But working on Green Horizon, meeting Claire Wilson, the landscape designer whose enthusiasm inspired him, gave him purpose. Not happiness, but something close. "I don't know if I'm happy," he said honestly, "but I feel alive. For the first time in a long time. This project is like my dream that I put aside for everything else, and now I want her back. For myself, and for you and Aiden." Sophia nodded, her eyes sparkling. "This is great. I want it too. I want to do something that makes a difference, not just hanging out with people who don't care about me." Michael frowned, catching the hint in her words. "What do you mean? Your friends? Is there something wrong with them?" She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "They're not friends, Dad. I realized this recently, after everything that happened. They started whispering as if I couldn't hear. They talked about Mom, about you, about the divorce. Some people asked if it was true that Mom. Well, I'm tired of pretending it doesn't hurt me, so I just stopped talking to them." Michael felt anger flare in his chest, not at Sophia, but at those who made his daughter feel this way. He knew how gossip poisons everything around him. They followed Allison at work, him in the office, and now they got to Sophia. But he was proud that she found the strength to move on from it. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice firm. "People who talk behind your back are not worth your time. You are stronger than them." Sophia smiled, but her smile was sad. "Maybe, but it's hard. I feel lonely sometimes, so I started studying more and draw. Miss Harper, my art teacher, says I have talent. She suggested applying to art school. There's a program for high school students with portfolios and everything." Michael froze, his fork stopping halfway to his mouth. "Art school? Sophie, this is amazing. Are you serious?" She nodded, her cheeks turning pink again. "Yes. I'm not sure if they'll take me, but I want to try. It's like your project, something that makes me me." He put down his fork and leaned towards her, his eyes sparkling with pride. "Sophia, you will do it, and I will help you. Whatever you need, materials, lessons, recommendations, I will find a way. You deserve it." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled wider. "Thank you, Dad. You are the best." Michael felt the lump in his throat melt away. He stood up, walked around the table, and hugged her, pressing her to him. She hugged him back, her arms tight, as if she was afraid he would disappear. At that moment, he realized that despite all the chaos, the divorce, the gossip, Aiden running away, he still had a family. Sophia and Aiden were his foundation, and he wouldn't let anything destroy them. They finished dinner chatting about her art project and his meeting with Claire Wilson, who had sent in new ideas for the Green Horizon landscape. Sophia listened with interest, asking questions about green roofs and solar panels. For the first time in months, Michael felt that their conversation was not about pain, but about the future. After dinner, Sophia returned to her sketchbook and Michael put away the dishes. He checked his phone, a message from Catherine, his lawyer. "Allison wants a custody meeting. Her lawyer is pressing. Be prepared." Michael clenched his teeth. Allison wouldn't give up, but he was ready for a fight. He also thought about Laura Collins, whose Instagram remained private, but whose silence suggested his email with the photos was probably on target. Nathan may already be reaping the rewards of his betrayal. Michael looked at Sophia, her pencil moving across the paper, creating something beautiful out of the chaos of their lives. Her determination and courage inspired him. He returned to his drawing board, opening the sketches for Green Horizon. The rain beat on the windows, but now this sound was not a funeral march, but the rhythm of their rebirth. Sophia was building her future, and he was building his for her, for Aiden, for himself. Michael Cannon stood at the drawing board in his office in Portland's Albina neighborhood, his pencil skimming across the paper, adding the finishing touches to a sketch of Green Horizon. The project of a residential complex with green roofs and integrated gardens became his refuge, a way to recapture the passion for architecture that he had buried in favor of routine. Across from him, at a table littered with layouts and printouts, sat Claire Wilson, a landscape designer whose red hair was pulled back into a messy bun. She bent over the plans for the community garden, her fingers tracing the diagram of the irrigation system. "If we add a cascading waterfall here," Claire said, pointing to a corner of the layout, "it will not only beautify the yard, but will also help with cooling in the heat. Plus, native plants like ferns will thrive." Michael nodded, his gaze lingering on her face a little longer than necessary. Her enthusiasm was infectious, like sunlight after a long winter. "Good idea. This will connect the courtyard with the green roof. Shall we add benches made from recycled wood?" Claire smiled, her green eyes sparkling. "You read my mind, Cannon. But I would also suggest a small stage for events. Residents love having a place for barbecues or concerts." They had been working together for 3 weeks, ever since they met at a conference on sustainable architecture. What began as a professional collaboration quickly blossomed into friendship. Claire wasn't just a talented designer. She was a person who saw Michael not as a broken husband or a father in crisis, but as an architect with a dream. Their meetings in the office or coffee shops became more and more frequent, and every conversation about the project, about life, about Portland gave Michael back a piece of himself that he thought he had lost. But today, looking at her, he caught himself with a thought that frightened him. He felt a warmth in his chest as she laughed, their hands accidentally touching over the blueprints. It wasn't just respect or gratitude. It was something more, and it made his heart beat faster and at the same time shrink in fear. After Allison's betrayal, after the pictures he kept in the evidence folder, the thought of new feelings seemed like a minefield. He didn't trust himself. And what's worse, he didn't trust the world that had already crushed him once. "Hey, where are you?" Claire's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. She looked at him, her eyebrow raised. "You stared at that waterfall as if it had just spoken." Michael blinked, feeling his cheeks heat up. "Sorry, I was thinking." "Waterfall. Yeah, great idea." She tilted her head, her gaze becoming more attentive. "Is something wrong? You're kind of distant today." He shook his head, looking away at the sketches. "There's just a lot to do. Project, children, divorce. You know." Claire put down her pencil and crossed her arms, her smile fading. "Michael, I'm not a psychologist, but I can see when someone carries the whole world on themselves. Do you want to talk? Not about waterfalls or benches." He hesitated. Should I tell her? About the pain that still lived within him? About the fear that any new feeling will lead to a new betrayal? Claire was open, direct, but he didn't know if he was ready to bare his soul. Instead, he shrugged. "Everything is fine. Just tired." She didn't buy it. Claire stood up, walked around the table, and sat on the edge, her jeans brushing his arm. "Listen, I won't force you to turn your soul inside out, but I know you've been through a lot, and I see you fighting to get yourself back. This project," she nodded at the sketches, "is not just buildings, it's you. And you deserve to be happy, Michael. Not just survive, but live." Her words hit harder than he expected. He looked at her. Her face was serious but soft, without pity, only with genuine concern. He wanted to say that he didn't know how to be happy, that Allison had taken this part of him, that he was afraid to even think about something more than friendship. But instead he said, "I'm trying. But it's difficult. After everything." Claire nodded, her hand briefly touching his shoulder. "I know, and I'm not saying it will be easy, but you are already taking steps. You quit that stuffy company, started this project, and are fighting for your children. You are stronger than you think. And," she smiled, "you have me to remind you that life is not only a struggle." Michael felt the corners of his lips twitch into a smile. Her warmth, her faith in him were like a ray of light in a tunnel, but fear still kept him in chains. He remembered Allison, her laughter in their first apartment, her support, her love, which turned out to be a lie. What if he makes a mistake again? What if Claire, with her brightness and kindness, breaks him too? "Thank you, Claire," he said, his voice quieter than he intended. "I appreciate it. Is it true?" She looked at him as if she saw his doubts, but did not press. "Fine. But if you want to talk about anything, even about how I once got stuck in the mud at a construction site, I'm here." He laughed, and the sound surprised him. "Sounds like a story I need to hear." "Oh, you'll regret asking," she winked, returning to her chair. "Now let's finish this garden. I want it to be a masterpiece." They returned to work, but the atmosphere had changed. Michael felt her presence more acutely, not intrusive, but calming. They discussed the details of the project, joked, argued about the placement of trees, and with every moment he realized that Claire was becoming important. Not just as a colleague or friend, but as a person who saw the real him, and it scared him as much as it inspired him. That evening, after Claire left, Michael stayed in the office, looking at the sketches. He thought about her words about the right to happiness. He remembered Sophia, who found the strength to abandon toxic friends and pursue her dream in art school. He remembered Aiden, who, despite his anger, began to open up to him. They all fought, and maybe Claire was right. He deserved the same. But the fear of betrayal still lived in him. He opened his laptop and checked the anonymous email from which he had sent the pictures to Laura Collins. There was no response, but her Instagram remained private and Nathan's LinkedIn profile had not been updated in a week. Something was happening and Michael knew his move was working. Allison also did not give up. Catherine, his lawyer, said that her lawyer was preparing a counter-proposal for custody. Michael clenched his teeth. He wouldn't let her take the children or ruin his new life. He took out his phone and texted Claire, "Thanks for today. You're right, the project becomes a masterpiece." And, "I'll think about what you said." He hit send before he could change his mind. Her answer came a minute later. "Glad to hear it, Canon. Masterpieces are created together, and I keep your word." She added a winking face emoji, and Michael smiled. He closed his laptop and looked at the sketches of green horizon. The project was his dream, but Claire made it a reality. And perhaps she was right, he could afford to live, not just survive. But he will move slowly, carefully, like an architect checking every brick. The rain outside the window subsided, and in the silence Michael heard his pulse, not from fear, but from hope. Allison Cannon stood at the entrance to a local homeless shelter in South Portland, her hands clutching a tray of hot cross buns freshly baked for dinner. A cold wind blew through her thin coat, but she barely noticed it. Voices were buzzing inside the shelter. Volunteers were preparing tables. Visitors, wrapped in old jackets, were waiting for food and a warm word. Allison took a breath, gathering her courage, and stepped inside. This was her third day here, and each visit was difficult for her, but she felt that this was right, a small step towards regaining herself. A month ago, her life collapsed completely. After talking to Brian, her boss, about the distraction caused by rumors of an affair with Nathan Collins, she lost her job. Officially, she was fired for downsizing, but Allison knew the truth. Gossip had poisoned her reputation, and the company didn't want to be associated with drama. Colleagues who once admired her professionalism now avoided her, and those who whispered behind her back stopped pretending. She returned home to an empty house Michael had left, taking the children, and her world, which she had so carefully built, had turned into ruins. The first week without work was a nightmare. Allison lay on the couch for hours, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts swirling around her mistakes. She remembered Nathan, his easy smile, his words that made her feel alive. But now she saw it clearly. He was not salvation, but an illusion that cost her everything. She remembered Michael, his quiet devotion, his sacrifices for his family, his pain when he learned the truth. She hated herself for what she had done to him, to Aiden, to Sophia. She was saved by a chance meeting. In a coffee shop where she was trying to hide from the world, she got into a conversation with a woman named Martha, a shelter volunteer. Martha, with her kind eyes and straightforwardness, invited Allison to join. "Sometimes you have to help others to find yourself," she said. Allison, desperate and lost, agreed. And now, handing out food at the shelter, listening to the stories of people whose lives had been more broken than her own, she began to see a glimmer of hope. She also signed up for therapy. Her psychologist, Dr. Lynn Carter, was a soft-spoken woman with a sharp mind. At the first session, Allison cried as she talked about her affair, her divorce, her children who barely spoke to her. Lynn didn't judge, but asked questions that forced Allison to dig deep into herself. Why was she seeking Nathan's attention? Why didn't you talk to Michael about your loneliness? Why did you let the lies grow? The answers were painful, but they helped her understand that she was not a victim of circumstances, but a person who made a choice. And now she could make a new choice to become a better person. Allison began writing letters to Aiden and Sophia without sending them. She poured out her apologies, her love, her hopes for forgiveness. She knew she couldn't just call or come over. Michael had made it clear he didn't want to see her, and the kids were following his lead. But she took steps, careful and small. She sent Sophia a set of art pencils with a note, "I'm proud of you. Always." Sophia didn't answer, but she didn't return the gift, which was a tiny victory. She texted Aiden, apologizing for the pain she had caused, and to her surprise, he responded with one word, "Okay." It was not forgiveness, but a beginning. With Michael, it was more complicated. He was a closed door, a wall she couldn't break through. Her lawyer said that Michael was preparing for a tough custody battle, and Allison knew that he had pictures evidence of her infidelity. She didn't blame him for his anger, but she prayed that he would someday see her efforts. She didn't ask to come back, didn't ask for love. She just wanted him to know that she was changing. Michael Cannon was setting the table in his small apartment, preparing for a family dinner, the first in months with just him, Aiden and Sophia. He chose a simple menu: baked chicken, mashed potatoes, and green salad. The kitchen was filled with the smell of rosemary and garlic, and the radio played soft jazz. Sophia helped by chopping cucumbers, her hair pulled back into a high ponytail. Aiden, still sullen but less prickly than before, sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. Michael looked at them and felt that their family, although fractured, was beginning to find a new balance. Allison was in town. He knew that from Catherine, his lawyer. She asked to be at the dinner, not for herself, but for the children, to show that they could be a family, albeit in a new way. Michael agreed, but on the condition that she would stay away and not interfere. He wasn't ready to talk to her, not after everything. His heart still ached from her betrayal, and even her attempts at redemption, which he heard from Sophia, could not erase the pictures from the evidence folder. The door opened and Allison walked in, her steps cautious. She looked different, not that confident career woman, but a woman whose shoulders were slightly hunched, whose eyes were softer but full of pain. She was holding a box of pie from the bakery, her contribution to the dinner. Sophia smiled at her, but remained close to Michael. Aiden glanced briefly, but said nothing. "Thank you for letting me come," Allison said quietly, placing the pie on the table. Her voice was almost a whisper. Michael nodded without looking at her. "This is for the sake of the children." She didn't answer, she just walked away to the window, keeping her distance. Michael felt a slight sense of relief. She respected his boundaries, and that was more than he expected. Dinner got off to an awkward start. Aiden picked at his food, Sophia chatted about school, trying to fill the silence. Michael listened, asking questions, but his mind was on alert, as if he was waiting for Allison to upset the delicate balance. But she was silent, her gaze was focused on the children, full of love and regret. "Dad, I got enough for my art project," Sophia said, her eyes sparkling. "Miss Harper says my portfolio is almost ready for art school." Michael smiled, his pride was genuine. "This is amazing, Sophie. You are a star." Aiden snorted, but there was no malice in his tone. "She just talks about these drawings all day. We're already tired of it." Sophia stuck her tongue out at him, and Michael laughed. It was the first hint of their old dynamic, and he clung to it like a lifeline. He looked at Allison, expecting her to intervene, but she simply smiled, her hands clenching in her lap. "And you, Aiden?" Michael asked, trying to get his son involved. "How are things at school, after that incident?" Aiden shrugged, but answered, "Fine. Tyler doesn't bother anymore. And I was thinking about what you said, about the struggle. You really don't give up." Michael felt a warmth in his chest. "Never. For you and Sophia, never." Aiden nodded, his gaze softening. "That's cool, Dad. Your project, these houses are green. It's really cool." Allison moved slightly, but did not speak. Michael noticed her movement, but did not give it any meaning. This dinner was for the children, for their future. He talked about Green Horizon, his meetings with Claire Wilson, and how the project was beginning to attract the attention of investors. Sophia listened, asking questions, Aiden nodded, and Michael felt that their family, although changed, was taking on a new form. After dinner, Allison helped put away the dishes, but didn't stay long. She said goodbye to the children, hugging Sophia and touching Aiden's shoulder, who didn't pull away. She only said to Michael, "Thank you. I'm trying to fix everything." He nodded without answering. When she left, the apartment became quieter, but not empty. Sophia turned on the TV, Aiden pulled out his textbook, and Michael went back to his sketches. He thought about Claire, about her words that he deserved to be happy. Maybe she was right. But for now, his happiness was here in the children, in the project, in the steps towards a new life. The rain outside the window began again, but now it was soft, like a whisper. Michael looked at the sketches of Green Horizon, and thought that perhaps his horizon was not so far away. Michael Cannon stood in the center of the exhibition hall at the Portland Museum of Art, surrounded by the hum of voices, the clink of glasses, and the soft glow of spotlights illuminating architectural models. His project, Green Horizon, took center stage at the Sustainable Architecture Exhibition, an event that brought together leading designers, investors, and urban planners from across the Pacific Northwest. The complex's model, with its green roofs, cascading gardens, and solar panels, shone like a beacon of its rebirth. Nearby hung the sketches he worked on at night, and tablets with renderings created with the help of Claire Wilson, whose landscaping solutions added soul to the project. Michael straightened his tie, feeling the sweat beading on his palms. He's not used to attention. Years of working at a company where he painted parking lots and pharmacies made him invisible. But today, everything was different. People, architects in sharp suits, investors with sharp eyes, journalists with notepads approached him, asked questions, praised his vision. One of the organizers, an elderly man with gray hair at the temples, called Green Horizon the future of Portland. Another, a representative of an investment group, hinted at funding if Michael could scale the project. For the first time in years, he felt like he was on top, not just an architect, but a man whose dream had become a reality. Claire stood nearby, her red hair shining under the light and her smile wider than usual. She was wearing a dark green dress that showed off her energy and was holding a glass of champagne, but her attention was focused on Michael. She saw how he blossomed, how his shoulders straightened, how his voice became more confident with every conversation. She knew what he had been through: the divorce, Allison's betrayal, the struggle for his children, and her pride in him was almost palpable. "You're in your element, Cannon," she said as they retreated to the model to catch their breath. "Look, they're literally lining up to shake your hand." Michael grinned, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I'm not used to this. I feel like I'm faking it." "You're not pretending to be anything." Claire nudged him lightly with her elbow. "This is your moment. You earned it. And by the way, our waterfall is the star of the show. I've already heard two investors arguing over whose firm would finance it first." He looked at her, and the warmth in his chest grew stronger. Claire wasn't just his partner in the project. Over the months of working on Green Horizon, she became his support, the person who saw him not broken, but whole. Their friendship deepened, and Michael increasingly found himself thinking of her as more than just a colleague. Her laughter, her wit, her faith in him, all this awakened in him the feelings that he feared after Allison. But today, standing at the height of his triumph, he felt ready to take a step. The evening ended with a standing ovation as Michael was invited on stage to say a few words. He did not prepare a speech, but the words came on their own. He spoke about Green Horizon as a project that brings people back into contact with nature, about his dream of creating homes where families can grow and breathe. He thanked Claire, calling her the soul of the project, and the audience burst into applause. Aidan and Sophia, standing in the front row, beamed with pride. Aidan, still reserved, nodded to his father as Sophia waved, her smile brighter than the spotlights. Allison wasn't there. Michael didn't invite her, and she didn't insist, respecting his boundaries. After the exhibition, Michael, Claire, Aidan, and Sophia went outside, where the air was cool and smelled of rain. The children decided to go home with Michael's sister, who took them for the night to give their father time to celebrate. Michael turned to Claire, his heart beating faster than he expected. "Would you like to go for a walk?" he asked. "There is one place where I have long wanted to take you." Claire raised an eyebrow, her smile playful. "Sounds intriguing. Lead the way, Cannon." They got into his car and drove out of town to an observation deck at the Columbia Gorge, an hour's drive from Portland. The road wound through forests where pines and cedars stood guard under the starry sky. Michael turned on the radio and soft guitar chords filled the silence. Claire looked out the window, her profile illuminated by the faint light of the dashboard. Michael stole a glance at her, feeling his determination grow within him. He knew what he wanted to do, and it scared him, but not as much as before. It was a fear of something new, and not of a repetition of the old. The Vista House observation deck was deserted at this late hour. They got out of the car, and the cold wind from the Oregon mountains hit their faces. A panorama stretched out before them, the dark silhouettes of the mountains, the silver ribbon of the Columbia River, the stars shining like shards of hope. Claire shivered coldly, and Michael took off his jacket, throwing it over her shoulders. "It's beautiful," she said, looking at the landscape. "How did you find this place?" "I came here when everything was falling apart," he answered, his voice quiet. Well, it helped me think. It reminded me that the world is bigger than my pain." Claire turned to him, her eyes serious. "You've been through hell, Michael, and look where you are now. Green horizon, your children, tonight. You didn't just survive. You've built something incredible." He looked at her, and the words he had been rehearsing in his head suddenly became real. "Claire, I wasn't ready for you. After Allison, after everything, I thought my heart was a ruin. But you showed me that I can build again. Not only buildings, but also life." Her breathing hitched, but she didn't look away. Michael stepped closer, his hands shaking, but he didn't stop. He took a small box from his pocket, a ring, simple, with a small emerald, which he had bought last week, succumbing to an impulse that he could not explain. "Claire Wilson," he said, opening the box, "you made me better than I was. You gave me hope, faith, and a dream. I want to build a future with you. Marry me." Her eyes widened, tears glinted on her eyelashes, but she smiled that smile that always made his heart beat faster. "Michael, are you serious?" "Never been more serious," he replied, his voice firm but soft. Claire laughed, her laughter mixed with the wind. She stepped towards him, her hands touching his face. "Yes, Michael. Yes, I will marry you." He placed the ring on her finger, and they embraced, her warmth an anchor in the cold night. Michael felt the last chains of the past, the pain of Allison's betrayal, the fear of new disappointment crumble. He kissed Claire, and her lips were the promise of a new chapter, not an end, but a beginning. They stood on the platform, looking at the mountains, her hand in his. Michael thought about his journey, about the pictures in the evidence folder, about the anger that almost consumed him, about the children who taught him to be stronger. Allison, wherever she was, sought her redemption, but her betrayal no longer defined it. It was the spark that ignited his rebirth. "What's next?" Claire asked, her voice soft but full of anticipation. "We're building," Michael answered, squeezing her hand. "Green horizon, our lives, everything. Together." She nodded, and they walked back to the car, their steps sounding in unison. Far below, the Columbia River flowed like time, carrying away the past and opening up a new horizon. Michael knew that his family, Aiden, Sophia, now Claire, was his foundation, and he was ready to build on it, brick by brick, towards the sky. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.